This is actually installing the landing gear, front landing gear. First of all, you have to remove the plastic piece that comes with it lightly glued, and without removing that you cannot insert and place the frame of the front landing gear. So first of all you have to remove that and then align it correctly and put the three screws, main screws. What I'm doing here is placing the locking mechanism gear, which is easy to put on, and you have to place the rod and also connect it to the gear itself. There's an arm that has to be aligned correctly for the locking mechanism to work. So you may have to do a couple of tests once you connect it to make sure that it does the locking mechanism. There's a bit of a challenge of placing the wood piece of the door servo for the door opening and closing. So it may be a bit difficult to do it at once, but with patience you should be able to do that as well. It took a while for me to get the hang of it. After completing the servo install for the door, and you can hook the door and make sure that part is complete, and then put the place the plastic piece back and glue with something that that you can remove later, because you may have to work on this area later on. This is how the system works. So the rudder works exactly the way that I expected, and you can see the locking mechanism also works. Please make sure that you test it before you finalize the installation and fly. I'm installing the servos for the main gear doors. There are two pieces has to go there, which is very straightforward and easy, nothing complicated there. And make sure that you get the rod correctly adjusted to make sure that a door won't open halfway kind of. So first of all, run the servos without connecting it to the door, and then once you get the correct position, finally correct the doors. I also had to make a hole between the front landing gear and the main landing gear to drag wires through it. So I use a heated ball to make a hole sufficient enough to grab all the wires so that I don't have to bring them underneath. You can see me dragging all the wires and effortlessly, so which is big hole that can accommodate all wires. Now I'm placing the main gear itself, and you have to be careful of the wires. There are three wires coming out of it, two brakes and the gear itself, and align them correctly and screw them lightly first to get the alignment done. Later you can tie them up. This is actually the one that locked the main gear. The wheels, once it's deployed, it get locked. These are the two, does that part, and it goes to the top of the framework. I'll show you how to fit all together once I go into that, which is very important. Without this, most probably you will break the landing gear. So it's very important to have this piece. make sure that you align the locking mechanism frame with the two servos and tighten them um, after tightening the main frame, because after you screw this you cannot adjust anything, because these two tight both the frames, so you had to tighten them correctly at this point. So you can see me tightening the other screws as well, just to make sure everything is correctly lined up. Then you may place the final piece, which is actually a plastic blue color piece. It has 3 screws to cover the frame. Those are plastic to plastic kind of a connection, so don't tight so strongly. This is to show you how I set up the gear lock. As you can see, I connected the rod to the servo connector and also then to the gear lock itself here. So you have to do that as well to protect the gear, landing gear lock. While testing the deployment of main landing gear, please notice the locking mechanism, how it works. It takes about 10 seconds, so you can see clearly it is working. Hi, you already have seen me putting the landing gear all together, and it went smoothly at the end, and you have to have enough patience and do it neatly and cleanly. Um, One thing that I had to mention putting the gear together is that once you put everything together, before you connect it to your receiver and test it for the first time, make sure to disconnect the door connectors to the servos, because when I did initially, land gear was down, deployed, and as soon as I plug everything in and connect the remote, even though remote says the landing gear is down, the doors tend to close when it's initialized, and front landing gear door was closing and closed against the front wheel, and it was very tight, and I thought it will break. So to avoid that situation, make sure you disconnect all the connectors to the door. You can connect the servos, but servos will move, but do not connect the connector to the door itself. Keep the doors open, get the landing gear down, and then switch off the transmitter, and then connect the doors and test it again while the gear is inside, not deployed. That way you are saving any damages to the door. But in my case, it did not damage, but it would have given the situation, because it was very tight. I couldn't even move it. It was holding it. So I had to be careful. Other than that, there's nothing special. Everything went smoothly. Um, Finally, you had to glue this particular piece I showed earlier. This has to come off. This plastic piece has to come off. Originally, when you have the kit, it just glued lightly. You can just quickly remove it. But I would recommend you to do the same, even if you finalize everything, because end of the day you might be working on this area later on, so that you should be able to remove it very quickly. So just use a light glue. I use one of the glue that it's hard, but if you want to take off, you can remove it um, from the foam without damaging the foam. So that's what I use normally, those sort of places that I might remove it later, kind of. But it's strong enough that it won't come off unless you really put a force onto that. So I use one of those glues, and now I already glued it, and now everything everything actually completed in this section. Only thing is at the bottom I had to put the ESC, but I'm not going to do it right now because the gap and the distance has to be same as my other jet of the same F16 camo version. So I don't want to change the CG by moving the ESC forward or backwards. So I just want to make sure that I do it exactly the same spot, so that what I figured out with my camo version, I don't want to go through the whole thing to figure out the CG because that was painful. So I'm just going to do exactly that so that I don't have to worry about the CG on my maiden flight.